Welcome everybody. Good morning or good afternoon to those of you who are online with us today. Thank you again for joining the Valiantis and Eliason Group is Agile Dead webinar. Today we'll be going through the truth about Agile, success and failures. Just some housekeeping items. Please keep yourselves all on mute. In the meantime, if you have questions at all, instead of raising your hands today, can you please just throw all questions into either the questions box or the chat box, and we will have a good 15 minutes towards the end of the webinar to go through those questions and make sure we address them all. Another cool update is on the call today, one of our great speakers is Dean McNeil, who wrote almost what I consider the Bible for Agile and Jira Align. And one of the attendees on today's call will be a lucky winner to receive a copy of that. More on that later. So without further ado, I'll jump right on in and formally introduce our presenters. Today we have Dean McNeil, who is the head of Agile practice at Agile at Scale practice at Valiantis. Comes with years of experience in the Agile industry, but has worked with many high-end organizations to implement and to really orchestrate the Agile at Scale practice and thought process there. We also have James Sweet from Eliason Group. He is the Agile Delivery Lead and Transformation Architect there, who comes with another ton of experience in the Agile at Scale fields or industry, and super excited to get both of their insider view into really answering the question, is Agile really dead? So some key concepts that you all will be able to pick up on after this webinar today is the promise of Agile, right? Shortened cycle times, optimized value delivery, increased effectiveness, and reduced costs. They may or may not have been as advertised for you and your organization. So we'll go through that and find out why. But what is really the lack of results? Is it the fault of Agile or is it something else completely? And are the promises of Agile fact or fantasy? Exactly. What exactly does that look like for your organization? And why do some companies, maybe yours, maybe a colleague's, see great results while others do not? So real quick through the session outline, what Agile is. We'll be going through what Agile is not. The promise of successful Agile, again, is it fact or fantasy? Who succeeds and who doesn't, but most importantly, why? Some tools that help you succeed. And then the 7 things you can do to get the most out of Agile. And again, saving some time to go through the questions that you have. For now, and without further ado, I will turn it over to our great speakers, Dean and James.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I am just so happy to be here. As you know, I'm so passionate about Agile practices and tools and really bridging the gap between the two. And as an author, I'm so fascinated with the origins of words. So to begin addressing what Agile is and what it is not, I wanted to take a look at the root meaning of the word. So in the English language, we started using the word in the 1580s, but it goes back to the Latin for nimble and quick. And we all know from childhood days with Jack Be Nimble how important it is, right, to be nimble and quick and responsive and adaptive. And these are going to be themes throughout today. Nimble and quick, just like, by the way, the F-22 Raptor shown here. So I thought we would give a little look into that word, how it goes all the way back to that Proto-Indo-European meaning to drive or to move. So with that, I would like to also just quickly point out that word mind here, Agile of mind. Agile is a mindset. So I'm going to turn it over to James to address that aspect of it.
Thanks, Dean. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. One of the things I'm very passionate about, along with Dean, is making sure that we're all speaking from the same taxonomy. And when we work with companies, we hear a lot of people referring to Agile as a process or a methodology, and that's not what it is. Agile is really a mindset. The way I phrased it is it starts with 1 square foot of real estate between your ears. It's 4 values and 12 principles but it can be manifested through an unlimited number of practices. And what I mean by that is there is no law, and there might be some purists on this webinar who will take issue with this. There's no law that says that Agile and business as usual, or what we sometimes refer to as waterfall, can't coexist. In fact, they coexist all the time and can help make each other better. It's important to understand that with values and principles, there is no methodology or process. It really is a set of guardrails and guidelines that help us make critical decisions. And so the important thing with Agile, and since 2011 and the advent of Lean into Agile, it's really about adopting that Lean and Agile mindset, and that can be applied literally to anything. And I think, Dean, you want to maybe talk a little bit about what it is not.
Yeah, that's coming up shortly, but you've got one more mindset slide. No, oh wait, maybe we took that one out.
I didn't think so. I was hoping.
Agilism. There's a lot of thanks. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about Agile. As James mentioned, it's not process, right? It's not heavy. It's not methodology. It's definitely not command and control. That's something that we see a lot out there. So, you know, as James says, the thoughts and actions and behaviors that got you where you are today won't get you where you need to go to remain competitive. So many companies have faced these types of challenges. So if we take a look at the logos here, James, why don't you walk us through some of these?
Yeah, and I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on all of these, but right, it's pretty clear the examples of companies that have not understood that what got them where they're at won't get them where they need to go. Blockbuster is a notable example. Several members of Blockbuster's leadership went to Blockbuster and said, hey, we've got this really great idea of how to take us into the future that's not going to be just about how we mail out DVDs. It'll be about how we can stream some of this content. And the ultimate leadership at Blockbuster said, we're good. We know what we're all about. We know what we are doing, and we're going to keep doing that. Those folks went off and started a little company called Netflix that some of you may have heard about. The last Blockbuster on the planet, which was in Alaska, closed in December. There are other examples here of companies that may still have a presence, but they're not the same presence that they used to have. The one that I like to talk a little bit about is Sears, which was the Amazon of the time. You could literally buy a house in the Sears catalog, which was 47,000 items, give or take. And Sears has really gone by the wayside unless you go to Mexico and some other countries where Sears is still pretty big. But in the US, Sears doesn't exist anymore. So the thing here is that Lean and Agile mindsets, that notion of the F-22 Raptor, allow us to look at what's coming down the pike in our markets, in our industries, and allows us to certainly respond to that, but hopefully be a little bit forward thinking and maybe even do some disruption. Going to the next slide.
Indeed, adaptability to change, right, is
right.
Key.
Hugely important.
All right, so Agile has had some great success, and this is pointed out in the 15th annual State of Agile report from last year. So if you look at the respondents, you know, with 70% stating that the ability to respond to changing priorities and handle changing priorities, making all work visible, the visibility into what's happening, so that you could have good decision support to make those kinds of strategic pivots and things like that with adaptability. Business and IT alignment, so basically breaking down those silos across the organization so you're functioning as one cohesive, what we call the connected enterprise, where all functions are working toward the same shared mission, the same top level strategy. So there are plenty of great advantages that our being materialized and great business outcomes being achieved here. And then James has some great stats from his work as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. So the 2021 Digital AI State of Agile is really great because they go and survey thousands of companies that have made the switch. These statistics are the 70% decrease in time to market, the 60% reduction in escape defects, and 80% increase in productivity are things that we actually have seen. When I say we, I'm talking about this from the perspective of the Eliason Group, but Dean and I talk all the time. And we've seen these results. So it's not just a survey. We've actually worked with clients to help them decrease their time to market by 70%, to reduce the amount of escape defects. What's an escape defect? Something that's found outside of the bounds of an iteration or something that's found by a customer or a user. And then increases in productivity, which frankly I don't like to talk about because it has a bit of a negative component, like we're going to make our teams do more with less, you know, that whole mythical do twice as much with half the people, and that's not necessarily true. However, when we apply the focus to doing the right things, we can get more of those right things done and lean out some of the waste, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail. I think actually it's in the next slide, Jacqueline.
Yeah, and before that, we actually have.
I'm sorry. Thank you for keeping me honest.
Of course, of course. We are curious. What exactly are some results that you are seeing at your organization? Some of those results that were on the right-hand side. So please feel free to quickly pop in some of those. And there is an option if you don't know them or if you haven't necessarily implemented any strong Agile methods just yet.
Yeah, and this is our way of sort of getting to the nitty-gritty with the folks on the call. Much like digital AI surveys, folks, it's nice to understand from the folks here, are you seeing results in your organization? And then like Jacqueline said, if you're not seeing those results, you know, tick that off and maybe you'll get a call from us and we can help with some of that.
Yeah, we'll give a few more seconds for y'all to respond. Seems some really great insight. Most Dean and James are increase in productivity. Quite a few though that they don't necessarily know. So that's something great to think about and take back to your org.
That is, thanks for pointing that out, Jacqueline. Yeah, it's important to track some metrics, but it's also important to make sure you're tracking the right metrics. You know, exactly. What happens when you start collecting data is everybody gets hot and bothered over the data. So let's make sure that we're tracking the right ones, and maybe in the question and answer section, we can talk about that.
Great point, James. Switching back over.
So, you know, meant to be a funny slide, but also meant to make people think, right? It's a cool story that digital AI does this survey and people say they get all these great results. But the reality is, if you are involved in the Agile community, if you read blogs, if you look at, you know, Medium, with any regularity, most of the folks who are doing some sort of Agile adoption are struggling to produce real results. Now, that may be because they're not measuring it, but it also may be that they're just struggling. A lot of organizations also suffer from that notion of change fatigue. And we hear from a lot of clients that Agile is just a buzzword. It's the flavor of the month. And the sad thing is, and we're going to talk about how we can show some of this when we talk about visibility, and when Dean talks at length about some of the tooling, it still takes too long and it costs too much for us to deliver solutions, right? So all of these promises of better, stronger, faster don't necessarily come to pass or come to fruition for organizations that are implementing Agile. So Dean, maybe we could talk about some of the whys there.
Yeah, the top reasons for lack of Agile success. So again, this from 15th Annual State of Agile from Digital AI. So if you look at the respondents here, the 46% of them talked about inconsistent practices and processes. Well, as we know from the tooling side, we're going to talk about this some more, it's critical that you have your practices consistent and your underlying data consistent and your underlying structures consistent, so that way you could scale and you could achieve the benefits of that connected enterprise that we'll be talking more about. Culture is a big one. We'll talk a little bit more about that. As Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And you really want to pay attention to that when you're in the midst of any sort of change, especially when you're implementing agile ways of working and the tooling that supports those ways of working. Leadership is going to be key, and we'll talk more about this. Look at those numbers there, 40% and 41% talking about either inadequate or absence altogether of leadership in that change. So rather than leading the change, we're seeing some insufficient leadership in that case, in that area. So those would be some of the top reasons. And then there's another one James will talk about. Go ahead and move on to the next slide there, Jacqueline. It's when you don't quite really embrace Agile, and
yeah, really, the main reason, those last 2 points are really key, because leadership often thinks that Agile is something that's done over there, and that's just putting lipstick on the business as usual pig. And as we mentioned before, what got you where you are today isn't going to get you where you need to go in the future. She's cute, but she doesn't really help you in any way. It's really critical that leadership understands that local optimization, working with teams that are developing software or delivering value, developing products, doing optimization at that level is only going to get you about a 10, maybe 20% incremental benefit over what you're doing today. If you really want to get the promise of Agile, decrease cycle times, the ability to respond to changing priorities, the ability to foresee what's coming, you have to have leadership not just engaged, not just saying, yes, we're going to do Agile, yes, we're going to do large scale Scrum or Scrum at scale or SAFe or whatever. They have to actually fundamentally change the way they think, talk, and act about the work that we're doing. And if they're not willing to do that, there's no reason to waste time and energy on trying to adopt Lean and Agile. It's just not going to work. And the reason that these things are important, and as we look at companies that we work with on a regular basis, I won't name any names because I don't want to call anybody's baby ugly, but we see that organizations are slow, bureaucratic, and broken. And one of the ways that we know that is everybody's unhappy. It's not just the customers, and it's not just the employees. Executives and stakeholders are unhappy as well. And even before COVID, turbulent change was a matter of course. We've all seen massive amounts of change in the last couple of years. And I just mean in the way that we do this, in the way that we do our work, in the amount of hours that we work sitting in our chairs at home, or sometimes going to the office. But a company's ability, an organization's ability, heck, a family's ability, a nonprofit's ability to look at opportunities and threats and then react accordingly can be huge. It's the difference between sustaining performance and falling behind. It's the difference between Netflix and Blockbuster. And by the way, Netflix isn't perfect either. They're in trouble right now as well. So, you know, this whole notion of we're going to get really big and economies of scale are going to move us forward, that doesn't exist anymore. And part of it is that we are operating in an environment where margins are really narrow, and those efficiency and cost containment efforts can be the difference between whether we make it or don't as well. So unhappy people, turbulent change, narrow margins are just three of the most important reasons why Danger Will Robinson, we really got to look at a different way of thinking about the work that we do and the way we talk about, act on, and accomplish that work.
Back to culture again and its importance. Just to drive the point home, we saw the point in the response to the State of Agile survey. Culture is key, and you want to cultivate your culture. You want to really pay attention to it. As Shine says here, if you do not manage culture, it manages you. And you may not even be aware of the extent to which this is happening.
Yeah, and that's an important one, right? Is that in a lot of cases, if leadership isn't engaged, just to sort of tie the bow on what we've been talking about before, in actively managing that culture, it will manage them, and that is crushing. So it's all encompassing. That alignment isn't just between the people doing the work and the people asking for the work. It's an alignment across the entire enterprise, and if you don't have that, you're kind of in trouble. I was going to say something a little off color, so I'm glad I caught myself. Go ahead, Dean. Sorry.
Oh, Jacqueline, you could change the slide. So we're going to be talking more about leadership, which is this is critical.
Yeah, you can't just pay lip services. The thing at the bottom is what I have already said, but it's really important. Leadership's got to lead the agile adoption, and it starts with why. If you think about the role of a product owner or even product management in an organization, right? They have two jobs: what and why. What are we doing and why are we doing it? Leadership needs to lead the agile adoption. You've got to have a compelling reason, and if you don't, then stop doing it. The other piece here is that leadership is the only part of the organization that has the authority to change and create a culture in which we continuously improve the human systems that govern how work is performed. So if leadership isn't engaged, if leadership isn't, and I don't mean they're paying lip service to it, I mean leadership is acting in an agile manner and embracing the concepts of lean and embodying the principles and the values, you're never going to get there. And so when we look at that lipstick on the waterfall or business as usual pig scenario, the reason is not because the people doing the work aren't doing better, it's because leadership hasn't been involved. So if you really want to experience the benefits that Agile promises, leadership can't just say, yes, my teams are going to go do Scrum. That isn't going to work. Leadership's got to embrace it, embody it. They've got to model it as well.
Indeed, and if you do so well, you could achieve the benefits we're all looking for. Now, the phrase connected enterprise is omnipresent, from aerospace to industrial IoT software. But for us, it means that people, work, time, and outcomes are connected from top-level strategy to low-level execution, and laterally across the entire organization. So it's multidimensional, yet one cohesive, mission-driven enterprise with all things connecting to the mission. You know, we like to bring in Darwin a lot when we talk about agility, because its adaptability is so key. If an enterprise were an organism, its mission might be simple survival. And if you don't adapt to change, what happens? As we've seen with some of those logos earlier, you don't survive. Now, enterprises today that we work with have loftier missions, right, than simple organisms, and that is the key. You want to really harness the power of your driven knowledge workers, right, and achieve the benefits of that connected enterprise. We talk about that in the book that my colleague Aslam and I put together, which doesn't really necessarily only focus on Jira Align, because there are underlying principles and practices no matter what tool you're going to implement, or no matter what enterprise agile planning platform you're going to implement. And Jira Align is the premier EAP out there, but the principles apply. Principles such as this one: no matter what the tool is, it's only as good as your underlying data, organizational structures, and agile practices that it visualizes and supports. And by the way, in case you're interested, check your follow-up email to the webinar, because one of you will win a copy. And if you don't want it, you could pass it on. It's great to always pay things forward and or donate it, but that'll be there. And also check the control panel as well in the webinar, because there are some free white papers available for you as well on the Connected Enterprise, your journey toward achieving it, and as well as organizing around value, which is another key principle that we like to not only talk about, but help companies actually implement, because that's critical. And that is going to help build that foundation from that team level, where teams are delivering stories within sprints to achieve sprint objectives, all the way up to the portfolio level, where now you've got strategic themes being delivered across business quarters to achieve top level goals that are all connected all the way to your top level strategy and mission. So with that, let's take a look at some of the views within Jira Align, if this is your platform of choice. So this is another way of summarizing that connected where strategy is connected to execution. This is just one of the modules within the strategy room, which is the pyramid that shows the levels of your strategic hierarchy from the top down, as well as the count of each item at each level. And notice at the lower levels, you've got your work items that are tied to the outcomes. So for example, here we see that there are 75 features out there that are tied to various program level objectives. And then when you move higher up into the pyramid, you've got themes that are tied, in this case, to yearly goals. These could be annual OKRs. All of this configurable, of course, in the platform, depending on your context. So you may use OKRs all the way through, or maybe you're a pure safe shop and you're using PI objectives at that program level. And you've got your strategic themes up higher at the portfolio level, as shown here. And those are indeed expressed as annual or other types of OKRs within the SAFe framework. But the key here, again, is having everything interconnected and also having everything visible. So let's take a look at the next slide here. This is one of the views that's very popular, where you
Dean, may I interject something really quickly?
Absolutely. Please do so.
I apologize. You just said something that made me, it clicked in my head. When we work with organizations, a lot of times we go in and we do a period of discovery. And what discovery is really what we used to call an assessment, but nobody likes to get assessed because we're judging you. And we are probably going to tell you that your baby's ugly. One of the things that we find is that we ask a question of the people doing the work. Do you know if, and if so, how, the work that you're doing ties to actual business objectives? And in 90% of the cases, the answer is no. So what Dean just said is really critical. This, whether it's this tool or another tool, it gives you visibility. And now you have allowed the people doing the work to have the information necessary to be able to make better economic decisions because you've given them the information, and to align that work to the objectives and the strategy of the organization. So that's hugely critical.
Yeah, and time for another poll. Go ahead, Jacqueline. Walk us through it.
And I was just about to say, great point, James and Dean, thank you. Before hopping right into a view of specifically Jira with our Atlassian expertise, I just wanted to get a quick polling to see what other tools you all on the call may or may not be using. And then again, there's an option there. It can either be other if you're using a different type of tool, excuse me, or if you do not use any tooling currently. And then we'll hop over to some Jira views. All right, great to see. For your awareness, Dean, most 82% use Jira. So that's actually great to go on to the next slide here. Go ahead and close the poll.
Great, yeah, no, so Jira, of course, being the top team level Agile tool out there, and then Jira Align that we're talking about here sits on top of that, and scales that team level up to your program, portfolio, all the way up to the enterprise level. So this is one of the key views when you're operating as that connected enterprise, and you've got multiple portfolios, perhaps, each of which has multiple programs or release trains if you're practicing SAFe. it's really key to get all work visible. This view has helped companies that we've worked with achieve savings just from elimination of duplicate work across the organization. Potentially big savings there. And what's great about this, so it gives you those dials where you are within that program increment or quarterly increment. That is that collection of sprints when you're operating at scale. That's that sweet spot of Agile at scale where you've now got teams of teams, okay? So the teams are in Jira in this case, or other tools as well, could connect to Jira Align, but your teams are delivering those stories within sprints, and now you've got your teams of teams delivering those larger level items, those features, also known as Jira epics within business quarters, and those rolling up to larger items, often portfolio level epics connected to themes. So what this allows you to do is from the top down or the bottom up, create these views and see where you are with your delivery for that quarterly increment, and really see, it allows you to identify orphan work that's not connected to strategy, as we talked about. That's so important, because then you could ask the question, well, why are we doing it if it's not connected to strategy, right? Because the why is so important. And from the top down, you could look at those larger level items as well, the ones that span quarters and that span, even years, and really take a look and drill down, and you could see a variety of information here, not just the status of delivery, but again, how everything's interconnected. Are there redundancies? Is there work that's not connected to strategy? Is there orphan work that needs to be questioned, et cetera? So this is a great one for monitoring as you're executing against strategy and working toward achieving those outcomes.
We have a client that is a pretty big telecom company that may or may not have 3 letters in their initials, that in just one of their business units implemented this with the LPM, lean portfolio management, that's around it, and they were able to save $4 million annually in doing what Dean was just talking about, reducing duplicative efforts, removing work that has no tie to any sort of strategy. And then another item that is hugely powerful, it's the ability to visualize dependencies as well. So $4 million is no joke, right? When you're talking about, now granted, when you're talking about an organization of 250,000 people and multi-billion dollars, but still, if you're talking about the ability to identify $4 million in savings, that's a pretty huge thing.
And to further talk about the importance of outcomes, let's take a look at one more view. This is about, again, outcomes over output. To use John Doerr's phrase, measure what matters. So here we're looking at an OKR heat map. This again is in that strategy room where we saw the pyramid earlier. Of course, all of these views that we're showing you, you could click and drill into for more details. These are the starting point, the higher level presentation, and then you could click in and drill for more information. So the heat map here has your color indicators and your statistics for a quick visual representation of how you're doing in terms of achieving the different levels of goals and objectives shown on the right, along with their item counts. Okay, those are the count, and you could click on those and see the work that's contributing to those outcomes, and you could click into those outcomes and find the details. So it's very good. And the color indicators, you've also got your score. If in this case, if you're doing OKRs, you're going to be capturing your score. And if you're 0.7 and above, that's green. If you're 0.4 to 0.5, you're going to be yellow. If you're 0.3 and below, you're going to be red, that kind of thing. We got some areas to work on here in this screenshot. Gray would be if the OKR was not scored. And in this case, those future PIs haven't started yet, so those haven't been scored. This indicates that none of the key results at the objective or goal level have been scored. If at least one key result has been scored, right, then that unscored key result, the unscored key results then receive a score of 0 in the calculations. So By the way, in Jira Align, all the details on how these screens work, down in the lower right, just click on help and it talks about how the screens are created. So you always know what it is you're looking at and how that data was derived, because that's important. So just wanted to show you that. It's just one of the other ways among many. I mean, there's hundreds of reports and, and so many different views of the data. We wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor here. Let's go ahead and proceed onward. Go ahead.
So as I mentioned earlier, right, when you're, a number of you said that maybe you're not tracking any metrics right now, and that's okay. But you can't really know what you're doing well and not doing well if you're not capturing some of that. And the greatest power of Lean and Agile is that when applied properly, it shines a glaring light of transparency on where you have problems, and then it allows you to have the actual information to be able to lean in and resolve those problems or not. You don't have to resolve every problem, but you have the information. And one of the ways that we get the information is, as Dean was saying, is by tracking that information, by collecting those metrics. And as Dean also mentioned, out of the box, Jira's got hundreds of reports. So the problem there is, Jacqueline, if you go to the next slide for me, please, is that with great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben said that to Peter Parker. And this is really critical, because just because you can do something does not necessarily mean that you ought to do something. So we always recommend start with the minimum set of metrics necessary to show that you're achieving those outcomes, and only do something more elaborate if you have to and you can prove it. So having 100 reports turned on doesn't mean that you're getting any meaningful data. It means that you're wading through a lot of unnecessary data. So do the minimum set to show that you're making progress, and also to show where, like the green, yellow, red heat map showed, where are we needing to lean in and figure out why we're not making progress on these OKRs. It may be that it's fine, but at least you have the data. You now have transparency, and now you have the power to make some decisions.
And you might be wondering now, what can you do as a takeaway to get the most out of Agile in your organization? So we talked about the critical need for leadership. And so embrace Agile as a leader. And we're talking leaders at all levels. We're all leaders in one way or another.
Yes.
And model the behavior.
The other thing is, if you don't have a why the heck are you doing Agile? Why are you trying to become Agile? There's a difference between doing it and being it, and that's part of the values and principles and the mindset versus we're doing Scrum. You don't have a compelling reason why. You need to raise your hand. I don't care what your role is, what your title is. Raise your hand and say, why the heck are we doing this? We need to have an objective that's smart, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, testable, that we can march toward, right? If not, what the heck are we doing this for?
And to talk again about OKRs, which are fantastic, and more companies are adopting them. Each OKR is a how, or rather a what, the objective, and then the how is the key results. Those still need to be connected to the why. That's the importance of connecting those up. And you saw in the pyramid, everything's tied to mission, vision, and values of your organization. So everybody knows the why. And that's another one of the nice functionality pieces in Jira Align that also integrates with Jira. So that way, even from the smallest level item that you're working on in Jira software, it could be a subtask of a story, which is connected to a feature, which is connected to an epic, which is connected to a strategic theme, which is connected to all the way to top level mission. And the knowledge worker sees that, and then is even more driven to know how their work is contributing to the mission of their company. And if they're aligned with their company's values, which is key too, as we talk about in one of the white papers that's available there in the control panel, then you've really got that synergistic connected enterprise, which is like a well-functioning adaptive organism of large scale. And so you want the people within that organized around value. That is the key here. That's value to the customer, their own sense of values that are connected to the organization's values. Again, mission, vision, and values. So to touch on number 3. And we looked at also in that OKR heat map, or many other views you could have of connecting to those outcomes, the strategic outcomes you're looking for, rather than focusing on work output, right? Because you get what you measure. If you're measuring points, fine, you get points, but what does a point mean, right? You want to know that, wait a minute, we actually were able to achieve these key quarterly outcomes with the activities that we planned for this business quarter, and those business outcomes are measurable, that kind of thing.
Well, and yeah, that's the other key thing there, right? Is it gives the teams the freedom to adapt, right? Instead of laying out a project schedule that says go do all these tasks, the teams are, and teams of teams are aligned around real business objectives, which sometimes has never happened before. So the ability to understand that I, as a person at this level of the organization, and am contributing to a real business objective, answers a lot of the problems that we talked about, and it creates alignment between people doing the work and people asking for the work. And when we do that, people make better decisions, and you get to shift authority to where that information is.
Indeed, yeah. To hit on point 6, that's a great one. And again, one last time, work toward eliminating those silos. That is going to, drastically improve your throughput. You're going to remove not just impediments, but that lag time of handoffs. You're going to achieve so many benefits. Even just the benefit alone of getting everybody together for quarterly planning, huge. It's a paradigm shift. Oh my goodness, I never met these people before. I used to just send an email that went around the world and da-da-da, but now we actually got everybody together. And hopefully we're doing that more and more now. But even if it's in a virtual setting, at least you're still together in that way to work toward eliminating those silos. So that's another thing you can do, is get everybody involved together for that critical planning effort. So.
And the real power there is it doesn't have to change anything on an HR chart. Like your org chart in HR, who you report to, doesn't have to change to be able to organize people around customer solutions and value. It's just gathering people towards that solution, whether you use a formal framework like large scale Scrum or SAFe or not. You can organize those people without changing who they report to on an org chart, and eliminate a lot of that hierarchical stuff that makes things take so long. So
absolutely. So we hope those 7 are helpful, and we do want some time for Q&A, and I think we've got 15 minutes left. So